Let's bring in our guest here for more insight. We've got NYU Stern School of Business Economics professor Nicholas Economides, and on the phone we've got Nareit Senior Vice President and former Federal Reserve economist Calvin Schnure. Professor, let me start with you. What is your read on the market's reaction from the central bank's action yesterday?
Well, I think what the central bank did was cut the interest rates a lot and restarting quantitative easing, which is really good. So these are important things on the supply side. I think what the market wants is some fiscal expansion measures, something like TARP, which saved the day in the previous crisis. So what we need is, for example, what the administration is proposing, cutting the employment tax, but we need to do it in a large scale, something of the order of 700 billion to 1 trillion, so that the market recovers, so that we think that that aspects of the demand come back in the market, because the Fed has done a whole bunch of stuff that needed to be done on the supply side. Now it's time for Congress and the administration to get together and push for fiscal policy expansion on the demand side.
Yeah, Mr. Schnure, when we talk about this too, I mean, you think so much about what happened during the financial crisis, since we're seeing a lot of the same Fed levers being pulled. But how does this crisis differ from what we saw back then? Because it's not just dealing with a lot of the centralized, a lot of the banks on Wall Street that we're dealing with here and fears around that, but also demand shock, small businesses. So how is this different, and what do you think needs to be done to make sure that the fears that might be out there are assuaged?
Probably the biggest difference is 12 years ago, there was a lot of financial weakness in terms of households that were overextended, banks that were undercapitalized, home prices that were overinflated. So when the shock hit, the crisis was able to propagate through the system. But one thing that Chairman Powell emphasized yesterday, and I agree with him, my own analysis is right in line with his, is that the economy was on very strong footing when this virus hit, with low unemployment rates, fairly good job growth, good wage growth, and most importantly here is you have a well-capitalized banking system with adequate liquidity and much better regulation than you did a decade ago, 12 years ago. And the other difference with a decade ago is if you looked at the period from, say, early 2007, when the market for subprime mortgage-backed securities really began to deteriorate, through the summer of 2008, it was a slow-rolling development. It was not a crisis, and it was not an interbanking crisis where the financial system seized up. And it was after Lehman and Fannie and Freddie were taken over and failed that you saw the financial system stop functioning. What the Fed is doing now is providing liquidity to the market, making sure the Treasury market functions smoothly, so that we have an adjustment that is not a problem within the financial system. So there are a lot of differences.
Mm-hmm. Professor Economides, it's Brian Chung here. I want to direct a question to you with regards to what the Fed is going to do next. So I understand that the Fed does have a few other tools that it could use, like TALF, like the commercial paper funding facility. But I'm wondering, just in terms of having rates low here and also with quantitative easing, we know that there's a monetary policy lag that tends to accompany these types of moves. I'm wondering, do you think that means that the Fed's going to try its hardest not to make another emergency announcement in the future and at least try to let it play out in the next few weeks? Or do you think that a material decline in economic conditions might force their hand into announcing something within, let's say, even the next week or two?
Well, it's difficult to say. We'll see how things go. I think the first priority right now is a fiscal stimulus, not necessarily what the Fed is going to do. But in the absence of a fiscal stimulus in the next week, we might see more moves by the Fed. I do hope that Congress and the administration take it very seriously to do a fiscal stimulus, that it's what they have done this far is inadequate. And we need to go with a much stronger policy on the fiscal side.
Professor, we did hear Larry Kudlow address that earlier at a press conference where he said there is $400 billion, essentially the federal government stands ready to inject into the economy. No question there's going to be a lot of attention given to what exactly will be done for the airlines that are hurting so much right now. What kind of bailout package do you think they should be looking at?
I think they should do something that supports demand across the board. Like the payroll tax is a good idea, because it's given to every company that hires workers and to every worker that works. So I think that just trying to take care of some specific sectors like airlines, tourism, recreation, I think that's not enough. We need an across-the-board stimulus package, something like the TARP program. And we need it to be of the same size as the TARP program, and 200 billion is not enough. We need 750 billion, maybe 1 trillion of that size of a program to be able to stabilize things and get out of this crisis quickly. Now, sooner or later, we'll get out of the crisis. The question is how we're going to get out of it quickly rather than, in May. I mean, we want to be able to get out of this quickly, if possible, in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think a lot of the country would agree with you on that, and we're going to wait and see what kind of stimulus packages could get put in place here. But for now, Professor Economides and Calvin Schnure, thank you so much for joining us. Our thanks to Brian Chung for breaking down all the Fed news as well. Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.